Choice Hotels get you more of what you value. Here's a little tune to help you remember. Same drive, different day. Don't you wish you were getting away? Pack your bags and come on through. Texas, Ohio, Alaska, we're up there too. Comfort Inn, it's calling your name. Save on the stay. Oh, and free waffles are yours to claim. Well, I hope you like my little song. Book direct at choicehotels.com.
Quiet Riot. Hello. Welcome to Quiet Riot Sunday School from the Cooler Heads team. The weekend ice cream with a flake, priced at no more than 99 pence, of course, to our expensive midweek Black Forest Gatto. Hallelujah. I'm Kenny.
And I'm Naomi. Hi, Kenny, how are you?
It is Friday. It's always the happiest day of the week, isn't it?
First Friday in August.
Yeah, it's whizzing by. It's been a good summer, apart from anything else, because I've become a grown-up when it comes to things like reading websites and scrolling on social media and doing all that sort of nonsense. So I freed up hours and hours of time just by being separated from my phone a little bit more than I used to be.
A lot of people are doing that. A lot of people are switching to that brick phone where it's basically, it can only do calls and texting and isn't really online. So yeah, don't blame you.
Do you use social media the same way you used to?
No, not at all. But listeners, we are now, as a podcast, on Instagram. So do give us a follow if you are still a Meta user. Our account is at Quiet Riot Pod. We'll leave a link in the show notes. But in setting up the Instagram account for Quiet Riot, it kind of reminded me that I hadn't really set up a new social media account on a new platform for quite a long time. And my relationship has changed so much since like the advent of Facebook.
Oh, God,
I was never really like one of those early nerd adopters in like community forums. But I was quite an early user of Facebook at the time when you actually had to have a .ac.uk email address to join it. It was still a student-only kind of thing. It was so good in those days for campaigning and coordinating on campaigning and deciding when you would go out to campaign. People you weren't necessarily friends with in real life, but whom you had a connection to because you were trying to get somebody elected or you were trying to arrange an action day of leaflet, dropping in a certain area or whatever. And then over the years, obviously, normal people joined social media platforms too. And then obviously we all know what's happened with X. But I find I now have this parasocial relationship. There is no more social media. It is parasocial.
Yeah.
I rarely comment on YouTube or TikToks or Instagrams. I'll consume it and scroll on.
Once you've broken that link, once you've stopped desperately trying to get another 10 followers, everything changes. It's like any other form of addiction, I think, that way. If you can break the link, you're free, as long as you don't trip up and go back.
Except LinkedIn. LinkedIn will find you wherever you are. Like, you can try and not use it. You can try and have never used it. You could be on a desert island on your own, and years later, a bottle would arrive, and the message inside it would be, "Have you thought about joining LinkedIn?"
It's like the most boring person you ever met, who really, really wants to be your friend. And every time you sit down with them, they talk about train spotting or something. LinkedIn is a remarkable success story because it's built its base over the years. And when you look at what it delivers, it really shouldn't. It should have been swallowed up by all the other social media out there. All the places that are showing you things that make your eyes bleed. And meanwhile, LinkedIn shows you stuff still. That so much of it reads like an Athena poster from the 1980s. People on LinkedIn still do that. They still have these big sayings that involve soaring egos and, just old bollocks.
Did you ever go on Friends United back in the early noughties when it launched?
The Friends United hooked me up with two very good friends. In fact, one of them, Pete, hello Pete if you're listening, was at our live show last week.
Hey, hi Pete.
That was, I think, I've got to be careful now because when I tell stories about my past, my old friends contact us and go, "You made that story up, mate. That's not how it happened."
That's true, they do. We get
You're
emails.
an old man and your brain is soup. Stop remembering things. But yeah, Friends United put us in touch with a couple of people. And then Friends United, of course, it went on its own journey into the pit.
Yeah.
But I did use it. I'd started using Facebook. I used to be first on. I was so quick at adopting new things.
Yeah.
Because I had the advantage of being a newspaper editor. So the stories would come in about something happening. They'd be embargoed, and I go, hang on a second, I need some of that action. So I've still got Kenny C as a Hotmail address. Some bastard got in at midnight and got Kenny, but I managed to get the Kenny C one because that's how fast I was. But yeah, these days, no. Blue Sky is the safe space for us all. I mean, it's not as exciting as other places, but
it's not.
It's manageable. And I still do have to look at the other sites for professional reasons. And also, just to see how X is still very useful for seeing how mad people think. It functions like a safe space for dipping into that.
As long as you're only lurking and not actually.
Oh, I don't remember the last time I posted. No.
Right. No. What should we talk about today, Kenny? I think that we might need to kick off with some stuff happening in Norfolk.
Oh, yeah.
It has, sleepy Norfolk, but this week has been the scene of quite a bit of unpleasantness. I got a bit panicked that it was going to become the new touch paper for wider scale riots. And there have been a couple of kind of interesting local election results from there this week. So can we make that topic one?
Cool. Well, if we're doing Norfolk for topic one, we should definitely zoom out for topic two. So why don't we look at the latest developments in Trump's ongoing war with renewable energy? And I suppose we could remind ourselves, because it's a timely opportunity, just to recap on what Scotland's role was in this dispute.
Yes, Trump and Scotland. All right, well, for our third and little mini topic, I want to get hyperlocal again. So we'll zoom in, zoom out, zoom back in again. Because as a Westminster Council resident, I have got firm views on the madness of our Conservative overlords threatening to ban, get this, Kenny, vertical drinking.
Kenny dives off to find out WTF vertical drinking is. I assume that horizontal imbibing, the traditional Friday night Glasgow way, is okay then. Bring on the chaise long. Okay, let's crack on.
Norfolk Digital.
You're listening to North Norfolk Digital, North Norfolk's best music mix.
It's the birthplace of Nelson and Boudicca, the place that gifted us Alan Partridge, and the home of the Cromer crab and Coleman's mustard. But this week, Norfolk is making news for less savoury reasons. In Thetford, there have been several nights of anti-migrant disorder, with homes believed to house asylum seekers targeted, attempts to force entry, people moved for their safety, police assaulted, even bitten, and 5 arrests reported by Friday morning, including one on suspicion of inciting racial hatred. Meanwhile, the day before, Reform took 2 council seats from the Conservatives elsewhere in Norfolk, in Heacham and Snettisham. Great names. None of this was a surprise to anyone familiar with the politics of East Anglia, but that doesn't diminish the significance as the Tories continue to fight a losing battle in areas they really should own. For their part, the Tories this week unveiled plans to bar foreign nationals from social housing while protecting some existing tenancies where there is UK, Irish or EU settled status. So while these 3 stories are technically separate, in reality they all sit on the same fault line, one that travels from immigration through housing and public confidence in the state all the way to the Conservatives' increasingly desperate struggle to stop Reform eating their lunch. Kenny, what actually happened in Thetford and why has it erupted there?
Well, I mean, you've covered the basics there. What started as local opposition to asylum accommodation escalated over a period of days into what's now violent anti-migrant disorder. And, there's been over 100 people involved at points. Houses that are believed to house asylum seekers have been targeted by groups of people. up to the point where folk have been trying to force their way into homes. As you said, police have been attacked. The background to all this is mounting anger in that part of the world over the government's plans for asylum accommodation around Thetford, particularly the proposed use of an old RAF site at Barnham.
Oh,
Now, yeah, there are legitimate questions about the scale of the plans, about the pressure on local services, and indeed about whether residents have been properly consulted. Let's listen to some of those involved in the disturbances.
Ladies and gentlemen, block the exit. 54 and number 3.
These in our country, they're supposed to protect and serve the government, what it means, what it actually says, yeah? Right, this government and past governments are not doing this. They're leaving us, they're laying lambs to the slaughter. It's basically what they're doing. It's disgusting.
But the immediate escalation appears to have followed the online circulation of addresses that were linked to asylum accommodation. And that is a very 21st century form of escalation. And it's at that point where protest against government policy becomes something very different. It becomes individuals being confronted and properly intimidated at their homes. I mean, I think it's important for us to say that it's possible to believe the government has mishandled the asylum accommodation in Norfolk badly, and also believe that targeting people housed
of course,
is completely acceptable.
I mean, these pogroms are just horrendous, right? It's
absolutely.
illegal. Yeah.
I'm kind of torn about the media coverage around this, because there have been plenty of warnings about, summers of discontent and yada yada, and we've always talked about the importance of not whipping up and inflaming the issues that can encourage people to take to the streets and start throwing bricks around. But I don't know whether you think the same as I do, that the media coverage has been a little bit muted compared with what we might describe as previous riots.
Yeah.
You've got to scroll a long way down some of the news sites to find the latest on what's going on. I mean, a long way down as well. Is that your impression as well, or am I just miscalling it?
Yeah. I mean, I had clocked that it had happened, but it's not, breaking, sat there on the front of the screen, on BBC News for hours at a time. And I've been trying to figure out what might be going on. Like, is it that Norfolk and Thetford, they're just harder to get to than other, it's notoriously not the easiest journey to ever go east-west across any part of our main island as it is to, get to areas where other riots have happened in the last few years, particularly in summer. Is it because actually what we were talking about on the show earlier in the week, that silly season is over because there is so much real news, and that this has just been crowded out by other bigger stories that have dominated over the last few days in the media? Or is it a sign that the momentum is falling out of far-right activity and community movement building over the last couple of years, since obviously we had a really tough summer in 2024? Is it just not as fun and novel an activity for the fash to get involved with when the weather is actually really nice?
I mean, certainly, look, the 2024 disorder spread across a whole heap of towns and cities, and it pretty quickly became a national policing and political crisis.
As far as Northern Ireland,
Quiet, Riot. Amazon Health AI presents Painful Thoughts.
Why did I search the internet for answers to my cold sore problem? Now I'm stuck down a rabbit hole filled with images of alarmingly graphic sores in various stages of ooze. I can clear my search history, but I can never unsee that.
Don't go down the rabbit hole. Amazon Health AI gets you the right care, fast. Healthcare just got less painful.
Quiet, Riot.
There's also an interesting question around the language that I'm seeing. I'm hearing a lot about protest, about unrest, and about disorder. And that sounds a whole lot different to, words like mob attacks.
Yeah.
Homes containing asylum seekers. The language itself is far less
Yeah.
incendiary
Good. Maybe they've learnt their bloody lesson.
Well, yeah. Now, I imagine if these protests, whatever you want to call them, were happening in Brixton or in Muswell Hill, for example, we would see very different language being used. But whatever the reason, it doesn't feel like previous examples of what we've seen when summer has heated up.
It doesn't feel yet like it's the tinderbox, that it's the spark that will kick off other things, and obviously we all really hope it doesn't. But nonetheless, horrendous for the refugees involved being housed, horrendous for the emergency services dealing with it and being attacked for it.
Pretty horrendous for a lot of the people out in Norfolk as well who don't share the views of the mobsters. Yeah.
But there were elections there this week as well, little local by-elections. What are we gleaning from it? Were they parish? Were they district? Were they county? Tell me more.
They were tiny. I can't remember what they were. They were tiny. There were hundreds of people voted, not thousands, in Heacham and in Snetisham, which, as you say, are great names for like gerbils.
Amazing.
They're just fab. However you parse the results and however we downplay them because they're local elections with small turnouts, the headlines were painful for the Conservatives. Reform took both seats from Badenoch's party. In Heacham, Reform took 37.6% of the vote, so comfortably above a third. They were followed by the Lib Dems, 28.5%, and the Conservatives back on 21%. So it was a hefty Reform win, but it was by no means a landslide. Turnout there, I should note, was less than 18%.
Wow.
It was almost accidental turnout. Snetisham, there's a much bigger turnout. 30% of the people turned out there. Reform won 35%, again, above a third.
Yeah.
But that was only 18 votes when you actually drill down into the numbers, ahead of the Lib Dems, who, again, came second. The Tories were a little bit better. They were just over 25% in third place, and Labour were way back under 7%. And turnout was just under 30%. So, look, the message isn't that Norfolk has suddenly turned Reform. We knew that already. At the May county elections, Reform won 40 seats, and the Conservatives won, I think it was 8.
Right.
And they topped the county-wide vote on 31.2%, something like that. So what the Thursday votes tell us, there's not a huge surprise, but they tell us that the Tory problem isn't going away. Even after a summer in which the Conservatives have worked hard to reposition time and time again on immigration, voters in territory that really ought to be fertile for them are still prepared to go directly to Reform. It's confirmation rather than revelation, but confirmation can often be, extremely useful.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, look, you've got a lot of things at play. Nationally, Kemi Badenoch is doing better, and certainly has sort of turned around her own sort of personal ratings in the last year. There are now multiple articles being written about, 3 major parties all being on the 20%, 22% share of the vote in Westminster voting intentions. So you've got that going on. You've got Rupert Lowe doing very well at puncturing Reform's lead in certain places. And when we look at, obviously the Makerfield by-election and Greater Manchester Mayor, you've got a really solid cohort of people who have begun to sort of say, no, we don't really love what's happening with Farage. And then more turned on by him. I mean, look, this is madness when you listen to what Rupert Lowe is saying about the king not being British or not answering the question. I mean, he's saying that unless both your parents were born in the UK, you can't really be indigenously British or whatever, ruling out old Charlie boy. Madness. But yet there is still this big cohort of people still prepared to say, no, that is the version of politics I want and agree with. So Reform are kind of, having a bit of a tricky situation to lead that block of right-wing voters in uniting behind them completely. But then you get these sort of local pockets of hope for them. But as you say, not at the scale that would make you think, oh, we've turned the corner now, it's all going to be okay.
Exactly.
We've got the Clacton by-election happening next week. Farage will absolutely romp home. Everyone will fall in love with him again. Forget about his myriad scandals and off we trot. So it's a kind of curious and evolving situation, I think, on the right of British politics.
It is, and something that we should really emphasise is that we're talking about East Anglia here. Norfolk, Suffolk, Essex, which is, for historical purposes, has been considered part of East Anglia. If Reform can't demonstrate that they bulldoze their way to the very top and start getting closer to 45-50% of the vote in seats like this, in little mini seats like this, it suggests that elsewhere, where compared with East Anglia, support for the Farage crew is far, far less. It does suggest that, as we've discussed on the show before, they're into the hard miles now. They've peaked and they've not gone away. We're not that naive. But the easy miles are over, and there's a long way before the next general election.
Well, we don't know.
Actually, fair point, well made.
We don't know. For listeners who weren't at the live show, on stage, everybody but me was talking about how there won't be an early general election, and I turned to the crowd wide-eyed. And I was like, don't you believe them?
I was sitting right at the back of the auditorium. I could almost touch your eyeballs. It was so wide.
Yeah, I am still preparing my own organisation for the prospect that there could be a general election next year or the year after, which would still make it an early general election. Quiet, Riot. We mentioned it briefly at the top of the show. Kevin Badenoch's new proposals around council housing, social housing. Talk us through a bit of that and where you think that story fits within this wider piece about the right all struggling for dominance and relevance within that right-wing voter bloc.
Yeah, politically the connection couldn't really be much clearer. The Conservatives are trying to demonstrate yet again that they can be tougher than Labour on immigration and welfare, and crucially persuade Reform voters that they don't need Nigel Farage to get those hardline policies. So the proposal that was announced on Friday would exclude foreign nationals from social housing, and according to the Conservatives, that could release something like 230,000 homes.
What, so you turf them out, you turf existing people out?
Question that's not answered. Where do they all go? Are they all going to be staying in tents down your local park? I may have missed that bit.
No, I don't think you have, because I'm pretty sure I heard the woman who runs the homelessness charity shelter talking about it. And she was saying, this absolutely would drive up homelessness. And of course, making the very good point that there are already a lot of things in place that mean you have to qualify for things like proving that you've got a local connection to the area.
That's right.
There are quite a lot of thresholds you have to meet in order to qualify for social housing already. So yeah, I'm not sure she's thought this one through.
No, I think it's a headline grabber and it's been written in the back of an envelope. And something else that's worth saying today, because we've been talking about Thetford, is that this approach wouldn't solve the immediate issue that sparked the Thetford protests. If you come to this country and you're an asylum seeker, as far as I'm aware, you are already ineligible for ordinary social housing. I think accommodation for those people is a Home Office responsibility, and it's not until you get granted refugee status that you become eligible on the same basis as other qualifying households. So anybody that sort of links the Tory policy directly to what's happening in Thetford is making a politically powerful point, but it's mixing up two very different housing systems. It's such a mess. It really is.
Yeah. What you've got to remember is that people with settled status in the UK, whether they came from the EU or further afield, they are not just the archetype that the right will often frame them as being, these working age men who are here to take benefits and all the rest of it. They are sometimes pensioners. They're people who have lived here for a very long time, maybe doing extremely difficult work that, most British people haven't wanted to do in social care, in the NHS, etc. And so you essentially could have a Tory leader announcing a plan that would brutally kick and drive children and pensioners out of their homes, and that would put even more pressure on councils, because they would still have to deal with the homelessness that would create. I mean, these are people in social housing because they cannot afford the private rented sector. I think she has not thought this through in terms of how her own base will react to that in reality.
It creates problems where problems don't exist. It's
Yeah.
that classic example of going, we've solved this problem, and 6 more problems go scuttling into the shadows on the back of that.
Yeah.
Do you think that what's going on this week then, specifically the Thetford stuff, I suppose I'm talking about, do you think it ultimately helps reform? Or, I mean, let's face it, it's the reform choir singing to each other in Thetford a lot of the time.
Well, he's got this tightrope, doesn't he? And there are what I've referred to previously on the show as the kind of red trouser, posh English gentleman supporter of Reform UK, who does not like the thuggery and brutishness of far-right skinhead would have been back in the day, quoting Farage here, tattooed, not me, young men who absolutely they don't want them to be in their club, their golf club, their political party club, whatever it is. And then the need for Farage to appeal to those very same people. He will need their votes. There are more of them than there are former UKIP supporters who have followed Farage wherever he's gone. Short of winning over the more kind of Tommy Robinson adjacent voter, he is going to struggle. So he's trying to walk the tightrope. But when these pockets of violence break out, it's not the posh rich bloke from Dorset that's lighting the touch paper. It is the kind of person that they don't associate themselves with and don't want to. And I heard a YouTube, because for my professional job, do a lot of consumption of the hard right social media content and long form YouTube videos. There's a guy called Liam Tufts who's very, very good friends with Tommy Robinson, and he himself has a pretty successful YouTube channel. And he was interviewing a reform councillor, I think from High Wycombe, who had been very good friends with Anne Widdecombe. So most of the interview was about that relationship and how, this guy was going to really miss Anne and she'd brought him into politics and all the rest of it. And Liam Tufts is pretty honest in saying, I don't know if I can back Nigel Farage because I don't know that he is an establishment. And I don't like the comments he's made about people with tattoos. And the Reform Councillor says, look, I've got tattoos. And Liam Tufts says, no, but you're wearing a long sleeve shirt. You're not flaunting them. And that's probably why you've been allowed to be part of the gang. And he said, look, if there's a general election tomorrow, I so hate the communists in charge that I probably would vote Reform. But he was essentially appealing to, but I don't want to have to. I want to be able to vote for a party, and he really likes Rupert Lowe and Ben Habib. He often cites them as examples of people that have got a stronger, moral code of right-wing purity than Nigel Farage. So the guys that I suspect are, pogroming around Thetford will also be the kind of people that will not like the Christopher Harbon donation to Nigel Farage.
I think you might be onto something. I mean, it's fascinating that so much of the debate around what's going on in the right is about, on the one hand, people talking about, hey, is Farage part of the establishment? Not sure about that, how I feel about that. And at the same time, and sometimes in the same sentence, hinting that authoritarianism is actually a good thing, without ever saying that the establishment and authoritarianism kind of go hand in hand in a lot of ways and in a lot of places. But you're seeking the same thing from different sides. And I think in terms of the bigger picture about what's happening in Norfolk and bringing back in, I dare say, the by-elections as well. There's a battle for all the parties looming here about who can convince voters that the state is actually in control of the border, of housing pressures, and is actually in control of the streets when we look at Thetford. But all at the same time as managing to walk that tightrope between being seen as authoritarianism in a bad way and being seen as the establishment.
And the British class system. I mean, that's what it's coming back down to. And whether you can convince a wide enough section of the electorate to get behind you, which in a first-past-the-post system doesn't actually have to be that many of them. Quiet.
Riot. The best summer memories are made outside, and LL Bean has the clothing and gear you need to make these memories. Their effortless styles are created for summers spent outside with family and friends. Like hand-sewn boat shoes, coastal cotton sweaters, rugged polos, and, of course, the iconic Boatin' Tote, which has been made right here in Maine since 1944. LL Bean. Be an outsider. Visit llbean.com to learn more.
Quiet. Riot.
Any country with windmills is a loser, okay? You just have to look. If they have windmills, they're a loser. You know, the windmills, boom, boom, boom. Hillary wanted to put up wind. If you have a windmill anywhere near your house, congratulations. Your house just went down 75% in value. And they say the noise causes cancer. You told me that one, okay? Try liking a windmill when it's 50 feet away from your house. We don't allow windmills. We're not allowing any windmills to go up. The wind doesn't blow. Those big windmills are so pathetic and so bad, so expensive to operate.
Now, this week, the German energy giant RWE announced a $1.22 billion deal with the US government to give up its offshore wind leases off New York, off California, and off Louisiana, and point the money at fossil fuels instead, of course. RWE repaid over $1 billion for that New York lease alone way back in 2022 in what was a Biden-era auction. But now it says that there's no path forward to getting the green light for the projects, and that the settlement lets set, and I quote, direct resources towards energy projects that can be advanced with certainty. Now, that certainty looks an awful lot like gas. $900 million for a stake in the Louisiana liquid LNG terminal, plus another $300 million towards a pipeline of 15 gas peaker plants. The Interior Secretary, Doug Burgum, well, he welcomed it as a voluntary investment in energy security. Oh, yes, that kind of voluntary investment. You've got to admire the choreography. The wind farm has never turned a blade. The taxpayer, of course, writes the check. And then everybody leaves the podium calling it a win. Ha ha. Now, look, this isn't a one-off. It's the fifth deal of its kind, even though it is comfortably the biggest. You can add it to the roughly $928 million that were handed to Total Energies back in March, another $885 million to Ocean Winds, the $765 million to Invenergy, and the relatively piddling $129 million to Duke Energy. The running total for persuading companies not to build offshore wind now sits at almost $4 billion. And that's $4 billion of public money. Now, 7 states, led by New York Attorney General Letitia James, are already suing over the Total Energies deal, which she's called a sham and an illegal agreement. And congressional Democrats, well, they've been picking at whether these payouts are lawful refunds or something closer to gifts drawn from a fund which is meant for court judgments. Trump, who we all know has been loudly hostile to what he calls windmills for well over a decade, he gets his campaign promise. RWE gets its billion back, and it gets a foothold in gas. And American bill payers, whose energy costs are already climbing, get to fund the whole damn thing. Just as an aside, a report last autumn found that every fully operational LNG facility in America had breached federal pollution limits. So the theme for today is simple enough. What does it mean when a government starts paying people to produce less power? Naomi, first up, let's start with just the sheer strangeness of all of this. I mean, we're kind of used to government subsidizing things they want more of. When did we start paying billions to get less energy?
The only thing that needs to drill, baby, drill is something into Trump's skull. Like to relieve the pressure on whatever is sending him completely fucking mad. He's got midterms coming up in 3 months' time that will be awful for him by all accounts, largely because of the cost of living crisis that he is failing to get on top of. And now he's making American taxpayers pay for energy that they're not going to get. It is mad. Look, the normal logic of a subsidy is that you pay to bring in something into existence, like a railway or a vaccine or a wind farm. And the state here is paying for the absence of it. It is buying the non-appearance of electricity. And when you think about what electricity is really needed for at the moment, like every forecaster is warning about the demand from data centers and AI going through the roof, things he wants and champions, right? So all of his stuff is very energy hungry. So you've now got a government that says it's obsessed with energy dominance, spending $4 billion to make sure gigawatts of power are never going to be generated. It's all a bit mad. And I was trying to think of like an analogy for it, right? Is it like hiring a personal chef, paying them an inordinate amount of money, and then paying them even more to say, don't cook me a thing, I'm on a diet? Like, it's like,
yes.
you know, and then there's the wording and all of it when you read into the detail, because language is everything, right? And they haven't stood up and said, we're going to pay to kill off wind farms. It's a settlement. It's voluntary investment. We are refocusing capital. Like RW haven't cancelled a project. They have, in their words, redeployed capital to accelerate value accretive opportunities. That is a wonderful string of words to say we took the billions and ran.
Thanks for your taxpayer dollars. I mean, let's dive into that a little bit, because this is all Alice in Wonderland stuff in so many ways, as you've said.
Yeah.
You know, and RWE and the administration, as you said, both use the word settlement. The critics are quite openly saying, no, settlement my backside. This is nothing more than a payoff.
Yeah.
Which is it really?
Well, I mean, the honest description is the government reimbursing companies for something that they willingly bought, in this case, leases on wind farms, and then handing them about what they paid back, but on the condition they walk away and put that money into fossil fuels instead. And there are legal question marks over it, as you raised earlier. Like the money for Total, that reportedly came out of the judgment fund, which Congress created to pay court-ordered judgments, not to unwind policy that the president doesn't dislike. So I think, you know, the label of it all does matter quite a bit, because the label is going to be what determines the outcome of these judicial reviews into all of it. So, like, if I sell you a field and you build nothing on it, and then I pay you back the full price that you gave me for that field, but only if you promise you will never farm it, but that you will buy like a gas cooker instead. Like my accountant and your accountant are going to have some really fucking serious questions for us. So you can call it a settlement if you like, but Congress is now looking at it and seeing a very expensive way of doing a political favor with somebody else's money.
It's so Trumpy, isn't it, that it's a settlement of sorts, but whether it's a lawful settlement, well, that depends on the court. So we just hear it again and again with Trump.
I mean, look, Trump has hated wind for years, right? He goes on and on and on about it. We heard a clip earlier, which was, you know, bringing together just a handful of the times that he has gone on and on in such a deranged way about it. How much of what we've seen with this RWE case is a coherent energy policy, if I ever use the word coherent and Trump together, and how much is a personal grudge finally getting its budget?
Let me be grown up about this and say that you can't really completely separate the two. And I don't think Trump would want you to separate the two. His hostility to turbines long predates his presidency. I mean, I remember him fighting an offshore, the offshore development that was visible from his Aberdeenshire golf course. And he fought it all the way to the Supreme Court in Britain, and he lost bigly as well.
Yeah.
And that rankles. You know, he hates losing, but he hates losing publicly as well. There is, though, whether we like it or not, there is a coherent Trump energy policy here. Favor oil, favor gas, and obstruct offshore wind. You know, the drill baby drill mantra is easy to say, even for him. It's easy to remember, but it's also pretty clear. We can't fault him on that particular part of his Alice in Wonderland energy policy. So the personal obsession and the policy agenda are now, they're aligned in the same direction. It's kind of like, the angry letters about turbines have got a federal department and $1 billion checkbook aligned with them now.
Yeah.
Can I ask you then the question that everybody should be asking in the States, that given that RWE is putting the money into LNG and gas plants, who is actually paying for all of these deals?
The public. So, twice over is the short answer, because they pay the settlement, that's $4 billion. But then the public pay again on the other side of the ledger because the money is being funneled into LNG at exactly the moment gas prices are volatile, partly thanks, of course, to Donald Trump again for disrupting supplies in the Gulf, and into facilities that a research group found were discharging illegal levels of bacteria, zinc, and oil into the waterways. So they're paying with their purse, they're paying with their health, they're paying the impact of climate. Essentially, American bill payers are financing a switch from a technology with a near zero fuel costs and no emissions to one that is more exposed to global price shocks and comes with this very well documented pollution record. So I'm telling you, that word affordable, that is doing heroic work in Burgum's statement.
Yeah.
And I think the cruel irony is that offshore wind, the whole selling point of it is that the fuel is free. The wind doesn't send you a fucking invoice. Gas does. It really does. And the size of the invoice depends on tankers, insurance premiums, pipelines, whatever is happening in the Strait of Hormuz from one day to the next. So they're paying a fortune to swap one energy source that cannot be embargoed for one that regularly is. And if you designed that on purpose, you would be quite pleased with yourself in a supervillain way. And I think Trump is.
Just before I get any emails, we do know on this show that there is an environmental cost to wind farms. We know that concrete comes with a big CO2 footprint. We know that the stuff they make blades out of is problematic.
Decommissioning.
All of that stuff. I mean, we're not completely naive, but relatively speaking, the filth that gets pumped out from fossil fuels.
Quiet, Riot.
What's that, bud? The Lincoln Summer Sales event is on now with exclusive offers? Oh, so you want to feel the wind pouring through the available open panoramic vista roof on a road trip? And spend the afternoon beachside hanging out on the back of the spacious Lincoln Splitgate? Okay, I'll schedule a Lincoln test drive today, right before your vet appointment. Visit your local Lincoln retailer or learn more at Lincoln.com.
Quiet, Riot.
Do you think any of it is reversible? You've got 7 states already in court. And of course, the political weather can change, and it will do with the midterms in November.
At some point in our lifetimes, it will be reversed because America is going to need the electricity. Full stop.
Right.
You can put that down there as my prediction. Whether that takes 5 years or 10 years, I don't know. But the fact that China has now got its coal reliance down to 50%. We talked about this on the show the other day, that they're now generating, instead of 80% of their energy from coal, it's down to 50%. And things like hydro and solar are going through the roof. America is not going to be able to ignore that, because apart from anything else, it gives China a huge competitive advantage when it comes to driving down the cost of production and the costs of living out there as well. So it's very definitely reversible, and it very definitely will be reversed. Not in this presidency, of course. The lost time, I think, is the key issue here, because the lost time is never, you never get that back.
It's opportunity cost, yeah.
Exactly that. And, a court can invalidate the arrangements, and a future administration could and probably will restart offshore wind permitting. The states challenging the Total deal are explicitly asking for that agreement to be vacated and the lease restored. But these projects take years, and developers move capital, they move supply chains elsewhere while the leases are getting surrendered. So even if Washington does change direction in a couple of years, they're not going to be able to just hit Control Z and have a wind farm appear off Long Island. So they're damaging their own future.
Yeah, they are. And presumably you've got these perverse incentives arriving as well, because if you are a developer watching this happening, you're going to ask yourself, all right, is it safer to build a wind farm or just hold on to the lease for a bit longer and wait for the government to buy me out for more than I paid for it? Like, it's a bit like that. It reminds me of the scandal that happened when we were still in the EU and some of our farmers got a subsidy for set-aside land. Do you remember?
Yeah, I
set it
remember
aside
it well.
and pay you to not farm it a bit. And it turned out that some of them were sending in coordinates for fields that were in the middle of the sea. And getting the cash for it. Oh, dear.
Humankind never misses an opportunity for a scam.
Quiet, Riot.
And now something lighter. Though Soho itself may not be laughing, Westminster Council's new draft licensing policy has floated the idea of discouraging, quote, vertical drinking. The ancient British art of standing upright with a pint in your fist, fag in the other hand, and steering Soho and the West End towards seated table service, order a little food with your drink respectability instead. Picture this, the French house, a pub where standing shoulder to shoulder is basically the house style, being asked to sit everyone down and take orders by waiter service only. Westminster Council's deputy leader, Tim Barnes, has rushed out to call the notion of a standing ban utterly ludicrous and insists they merely want venues to stop packing the pavements, which is the kind of denial that tends to surface only once everyone has read the actual wording. London Mayor Sadiq Khan is now vowing to intervene against, quote, restrictive policies. The nighttime industry is crying anti-growth. And somewhere, a Soho landlord is calculating how many bar stools it takes to strangle a Friday night. It is all very funny until you remember that Soho is, of course, one of the busiest nightlife districts in Europe, and that, if you'd like to stand, sir, I'll need you to take a seat first, is not historically how any great night out has ever begun. Kenny, what the fuck is vertical drinking?
Two things. First of all, can I do a parish note for our listeners in America? Because we're talking about standing with a fag in your hand in Soho. That means a cigarette. You're smoking a cigarette, okay? Nothing more than that for American listeners.
Well, so
and as for what
anything.
vertical drinking is, I checked. Vertical drinking is drinking. It's drinking while you're standing up.
I mean, if you drink lying down, you choke quite easily.
I've tried oftentimes. It just takes practice time. I mean, only local government can take something that we've all done. For humans have done for thousands of years and give it the name of a medical procedure. It's wonderfully ridiculous.
But central London has really struggled to recover from the pandemic. I can see it with my own eyes. Friday and Saturday nights aren't too bad, but with people working from home a lot more, you really do see the paucity of people being out on the streets, and you've got what was never really a 24-hour city, certainly not in my adult life. I was always a bit disappointed by how much of London kind of is packed up by midnight. But the cost of living crisis has made going out for a pint or three, really quite an expensive endeavour. So if the council does get their way on this, and it's presumably some kind of NIMBY thing to get the voters who do live in the area, and there is quite a lot of residential housing in Soho and Covent Garden, to get their votes, will it just accelerate managed decline?
Yeah, I think is a short answer to that. I mean, I remember this from my time in London when I was running Metro, back in 2010, after the banking crisis crash. We really started seeing the pressures build, not just in London, but on nightlife, the nightlife industry up and down the country. It's a serious issue. I mean, and we're quite rightly laughing at the idea of a crackdown on vertical drinking. But there's a very serious set of issues under here. London's late night venues are already about 28% under pre-pandemic levels.
Yeah.
And the London Assembly has warned in the past that more than 3,000 pubs and clubs could close that more than 3,000 pubs and clubs have closed in and around the capital since 2020. The thing about Soho is that it's got a huge economic advantage in this respect. And that advantage is its density. There are lots of people. There are lots of venues. There's lots of spontaneous spending.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly that. So if your response to a struggling nightlife is saying, well, we want fewer customers per pub, more restrictions, and maybe a little bit of earlier closing. Look, you're doing mouth-to-mouth resuscitation while you're sitting on a patient if you're trying to deal with struggling nightlife that way.
Yeah.
It's and it should be a non-starter in parts of vibrant cities where...
Don't fucking live in Soho if you don't want noisy pavements a few nights of the week.
Yeah. I'm coming to punch you.
Exactly.
And be joke.
I mean, the London Assembly report that was out a while ago found 3,000 pubs and clubs have closed in London since the beginning of the pandemic. And that is a much steeper decline than any other English region. You've got a 28% drop in bars, clubs and other late night venues in the 5 years to 2025. And that is the largest decline of any major city. Like you've got Liverpool, Manchester, Leeds now overtaking London in terms of nighttime transactions. And that feels right to me. I spend quite a lot of time in all three of those cities and they feel much younger and more vibrant at night than London does.
I think they've always felt that way in the last sort of 15 to 20 years anyway. It was one of the great revelations for me when I finally moved to London at the turn of the century. It was that if I was working late and I went out on a Friday night, having left the office at 11 or 12, I think, Rob, what am I going to do now? It was quite tricky. And you ended up doing that thing where you're thinking, I'm going to have to actually join a members club or something. And you go and you'd ask a cab driver, where can I go and get a drink? He'd say, well, you can go to a strip club, I suppose, or you can go to a casino. They'll be open till 5 and it's cheap. It wasn't like being on the continent. Disappointing.
They've got form on this. So for those who don't know, Labour ran the council very, very briefly for 4 years to 2024. Before then, like Zimbabwe had regime change more recently in the Westminster. The Tories had controlled it since the council was created in the 60s. And they've done stuff like this before. So they had like splashback anti-urination paint to try and stop
remember
people.
that.
Yeah, and there were like these "Don't pee off Soho" posters. So if their gripe is that packed pavements of drunk people means that there is more public urination or more littering or whatever, then the answer is more loos, like better late night infrastructure, not banning people from standing up. And there are so few public toilets in our capital city. Like there's one near a tube station near me that I can think of. There are a couple in Soho, but nowhere near what's needed. And really only for the men as well. It's quite difficult if you're not, able to use your urinals to find somewhere to go. So, I just think they're treating the wrong thing with this. And it's just going to hurt businesses, piss off, party goers, be pretty unenforceable and overwhelm the local bobbies on the beat that have got to deal with far more serious things happening late at night in Soho, like phone theft and stabbings and things like that.
The traditional pastimes for a late night on Friday or Saturday in Soho. I mean, the other thing is, of course, Soho accelerates towards the point in the future where it stops becoming the late night entertainment capital of the capital that it's been. And it's just an airport lounge at that point, without the perfume shops being open and without the stupid expensive watches. It's just a place where you go and you sit and you order a flipping omelette. And if you want to really let go, you go home and you get drunk at home, which is where a lot of problems begin.
Lots of social problems. Well, listeners, call to action. You don't have to live in Westminster Council to write to them, because if you ever do come to London for a weekend or to the theatre or to see your friends, let them know that this is not what you want from the centre of your capital city and that they have really gone on the wrong track with this one. So give them a little email of anger.
And is there, just to finish this section off then, Naomi, is there anything at all that's better standing up than sitting down?
Well, drinking is better stood up than sitting down.
Drinking
I think
is. Watching football for some people, not for me.
Not really allowed to do that post Hillsborough.
No, you're not. I mean, you can still watch rugby standing up. Standing up, there are places where I definitely don't want to stand up, but it's accepted. Trains that are doing 125 miles an hour. I don't want to be standing up in a train that's doing 125 miles an hour. Not because I'm not fit, but because I'll become a big squishy missile in the event anything is wrong with that train.
And then there's all that rumour that pops up every few years that Michael O'Leary of Ryanair is going to introduce standing seats so that he can pack even more of us onto a plane. I do not want that. I don't want to stand up on a plane or a train.
Dare I ask the question, is sex better standing up?
No, because now, look, there's sex and sex. If we were talking about actual
What do you mean there's sex and sex?
As in, like, there's oral sex. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, like, penetrative
I thought you meant like sex of potatoes.
Maybe in the gay community, it's easier because they are more likely to be of a similar height. But in the heterosexual community, where there tends to be a height differential, then I think I think that's too difficult. It's not pleasurable.
I think we should all, as well as additional urinals in Soho, there should be like places where you could rent a soapbox in case you fancy a neat trembler after the bar.
No, I think I will be on the side of the NIMBY residents if we return Soho to the days of fornication in the streets.
I'm buying tickets, mate.
Quiet Riot.
And with that, I am off for an extremely horizontal date with a can of beer on the sofa. So let's call time on today's Sunday School. We hope you enjoyed it and weren't too offended by it. And we hope that you enjoyed our main show this week and B-side with Arthur Snell. There were particularly good shows this week, so you had your money's worth from us.
And don't forget to give us a follow at Quiet Riot Pod if you're on Instagram. Please give us a few shares. Plus, if you're feeling flush, head over to ko-fi.com/Quiet Riot Pod for as little as $5 a month, and that will unlock access to our Discord channel and a few other little perks.
We'll be back on Thursday with a regular main show, which just happens to return us to East Anglia because it coincides with the Clacton by-election. Oh, deep joy.
We love you more than bins on ballot papers. Bye.
Quiet Riot.
Quiet Riot is an audio production from Cooler Heads, written and produced by Andreou, Naomi Smith, and Kenny Campbell. Music by Mariana Sangeeta, artwork by Simona Canelu, and edited by me, Alex Reese.
Quiet Riot.
Hey, it's Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. Now, I was looking for fun ways to tell you that Mint's offer of unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month is back. So I thought it would be fun if we made $15 bills. But it turns out that's very illegal. So there goes my big idea for the commercial. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3 months, $90 for 6 months, or $180 for 12-month plan required. $15 per month equivalent. Taxes and fees extra. Initial plan term only. Greater than 50 gigabytes may slow when network is busy. See terms.